The world of Lareth had always been a land of silence and shadows. Its deserts stretched endlessly, filled with red dust that seemed to whisper old songs when the wind blew. Beneath the tall stone towers of the capital, people gathered in grim anticipation. The air was heavy with the weight of tradition, a tradition that demanded life for balance, sacrifice for peace. And tonight, it was her turn. The alien woman stood at the center of the square, her hands bound with silver cords. She was tall, graceful, and carried the pale beauty of her royal bloodline. Her long hair, once admired as a crown of pride, now hung loose around her face like strands of sorrow. She was not afraid of death. She had been prepared for this since her birth. Her people believed she carried a curse, one that brought misfortune to every place she walked. The priests whispered that only her burial deep within the earth could calm the angry spirits and restore peace. She looked out at the crowd. Their faces were hard, their eyes sharp with judgment. None of them saw her as a woman. None of them saw her heart. To them, she was a burden to be thrown away, a failed heir to a throne already broken by war. Her mother had died in battle. Her father was gone, and now the last daughter of the line was only good for a grave. The priests raised their voices, chanting in low tones. A pit had already been dug into the ground, wide and deep, surrounded by stone torches that flickered against the dusk sky. The woman stood at the edge, the earth below yawning open like a mouth ready to swallow her. She felt the cold bite of fear, but she did not resist. What was the use of resisting? No one had ever stood for her. But fate is strange. From the far side of the square, a figure appeared. He did not belong here. He was a human, a traveler from a distant world. His clothes were rough, patched from long journeys, and dust clung to his boots. His eyes carried the weariness of someone who had seen too many wars, too many graves. He had wandered into this city searching for rest, yet what he saw now froze him in place. The human's name was Daniel. He had crossed many worlds in search of peace after leaving behind the battlefield of his own people. He was not a hero in his eyes, just a man trying to survive. But when he saw the alien woman bound and forced toward the pit, something inside him burned. He watched the priests lift their hands, watched the woman close her eyes as though accepting her fate, and then he heard her voice. It was soft, barely carried by the wind, but he caught it. She whispered her final wish. Let me be remembered, not as a curse, but as something more. Daniel could not understand all the words of her language, but he understood the sorrow. He had heard it before, in the cries of the dying and the silence of orphans left after battle. It was the sound of someone who had never been given a chance. Before he knew what he was doing, his legs moved. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring their shouts of anger. He reached the edge of the pit, just as the priests tried to force her down. His hands caught her arms, pulling her back. Gasps filled the square. The alien woman opened her eyes in shock. She saw a human stranger standing before her, his jaw set, his hands strong as they shielded her from the priests. For a heartbeat, she did not understand. Why would anyone stop this? Why would a man who owed her people nothing risk his life for her? Enough, Daniel said, his voice steady though his heart raced. You will not bury her alive. The crowd erupted in fury. Stones flew from angry hands, striking the ground, near his feet. The priest shouted that he was defying the will of the spirits, that he was a foreigner who knew nothing of their pain, but Daniel did not move. He stood tall, shielding her with his body. The alien woman felt a strange warmth rise in her chest. No one had ever stood between her and death before. She did not know this man, yet he acted as though her life mattered. You do not understand, human, one of the priests hissed. She carries the mark of misfortune. Her life poisons the tribe. Only the earth can cleanse it. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Where I come from, life is not thrown away because of fear. She is not poison. She is alive. That is enough. The alien crowd's anger grew, but some faces hesitated. Some eyes wavered, caught by the strength in the human's voice. The priest pushed forward, but Daniel pulled the woman close and stepped back. She whispered, her voice trembling. Why? Why are you doing this? He looked down at her, his expression calm but firm. Because no one deserves to be buried, alive. For the first time in her life, the alien woman felt confusion that was not born of despair. She had expected cruelty, indifference, even pity, but never this, never defiance on her behalf. The priests ordered the guards to seize him, but Daniel's hands tightened on hers. "Run," he said, and so they did. The square exploded in chaos as they pushed through the stunned crowd, sprinting down the narrow stone paths that led out of the city. The woman's breath came fast, her heart pounding in fear and disbelief. She had been ready to accept death. Now she was running for life beside a stranger who refused to let her go. Behind them, shouts rose. The priest called for hunters to chase them, for soldiers to bring them back. But the human did not slow. His grip was firm, his steps determined. The alien woman glanced back once, seeing the pit that had been meant for her fade into the distance. She felt her throat tighten, tears pricking her eyes. She had been ready to disappear into the earth, forgotten and unloved. Yet here she was, alive, pulled from the edge of death by hands that belonged to someone who should not even care. As the city lights grew smaller, swallowed by the desert's night, she finally spoke again. Her voice was quiet, trembling. "You do not even know my name." Daniel gave her a small, tired smile. "Then tell me." She hesitated, then whispered, "Liara?" "Liara," he repeated, as though promising her that name would never be lost. For the first time in her life, she felt her name held with gentleness, not hatred. She looked at him under the pale alien moonlight, wondering what strange path fate had opened. She had asked to be buried alive, but a human had given her something else instead. Hope, and hope was far more dangerous than death. The desert stretched wide before them, glowing faintly under the silver light of twin moons. Daniel and Liara moved quickly across the red sand, their footsteps soft but hurried. Behind them, the city walls loomed, alive with shouts and horns. The priest had sent men to chase them, and the echo of voices carried far in the still air. Liara's lungs burned as she ran. She had not eaten properly in days, and her body was weak from the days of waiting for her burial. The cords that once bound her wrists had left raw marks on her skin. Every step felt heavier than the last, yet she forced herself forward, clutching the hand of the human who had pulled her from death. Daniel glanced at her often, noticing the way her body trembled. He slowed his pace slightly, guiding her toward a cluster of jagged rocks where shadows could hide them. They slipped into the shelter, crouching low as the sound of hunters passed by in the distance. Liara leaned against the stone, gasping for air. Her hair clung to her face with sweat, and her eyes closed as she tried to steady her breath. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. "We can't stop long," he said quietly. "They're close." Liara looked at him with a strange mixture of confusion and sorrow. Why do you fight them? You do not know me. You do not belong here. If they catch you, they will bury you too." Daniel's expression hardened. His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed something deeper, something haunted. "I've seen too many people thrown away, too many graves dug for no reason. I won't let it happen again, not if I can stop it." Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to tell him that it was useless, that no one could fight tradition, that her people had buried countless before her in the name of peace. But the way he spoke, like a man carrying the weight of ghosts, stirred something inside her. For the first time, she wondered if her death had never truly been destiny, but simply the will of those too afraid to question it. The sound of footsteps drew closer. Daniel peered out from behind the rocks, his hand tightening around the hilt of the small blade at his belt. He was no stranger to danger. His body moved with the sharp awareness of a soldier who had lived through ambushes and hunts before. A group of hunters passed by, their armor clinking faintly. They carried long spears and lanterns that swayed with pale light. Their voices were low but firm as they called to one another. Liara trembled, pressing herself against the rock, her breath caught in her throat. Daniel crouched near her, raising a finger to his lips. His steady calm soothed her panic, though her heart still raced. The hunters walked past, their shadows stretching across the sand. One paused, turning his head as if sensing something. Liara held her breath until the man finally moved on. Only when the sound of their footsteps faded into the night did Daniel relax. He sheathed his blade and looked at her. "We have to move further. They'll search everywhere." Liara nodded weakly. She stood, but her knees buckled. Daniel caught her before she fell, steadying her with his arm. "You're exhausted," he said softly. Her eyes flickered with shame. "I am not strong. My people never saw me as strong. They said I was born only to curse them." Daniel's jaw clenched. He lifted her chin with gentle fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You're still alive. That is strength enough. Don't let them tell you otherwise." Her chest tightened at his words. She had never been spoken to like that before. His voice did not carry pity, nor judgment. It carried belief. Belief in her, even when she had none in herself. They continued their journey through the desert, the silence between them filled with unspoken thoughts. Hours passed and dawn painted the horizon in hues of orange and gold. Liara's legs trembled with every step, but Daniel stayed close, guiding her. By midday, they found a shallow cave carved into the cliffs. Inside, the air was cooler, the stone walls offering shade from the burning sun. Daniel led her in, then sat her gently against the wall. "You need water," he muttered, pulling a small flask from his pack. He handed it to her, and she drank greedily, drops running down her chin. When she finished, her eyes lowered. "You will not be able to return to the city now. You have made yourself their enemy." Daniel shrugged, sitting across from her. "Wouldn't be the first time I've made enemies." "You threw away your place among them," she said softly. "For me, a stranger." "Why?" He paused, staring at the flask in his hands. His voice, when it came, was quiet. "Because I've been in your place, not buried alive, but condemned. My own people once looked at me as though I carried a curse. Soldiers like me were praised when the war was loud, but when peace came, they didn't want us anymore. I was left behind." Liara tilted her head, studying him. His eyes carried scars not on his body, but deep within. She understood then. He knew the pain of being cast aside. That was why he could not let her be buried. "Then perhaps," she whispered, "we are both cursed." Daniel met her gaze and shook his head firmly. "No, we are alive. That is not a curse. That is a chance." The words echoed in her mind long after silence returned. That night, as stars filled the sky, Liara lay awake in the cave. Daniel rested near the entrance, his blade close at hand, his posture relaxed, yet ready. She watched him in the quiet darkness, her thoughts tangled. Her people had told her she was unworthy, that her blood was cursed. Yet this human who had no reason to care had given her more protection in one night than her tribe had in her entire life. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time, she began to wonder if her life truly had meaning beyond sacrifice. The next morning, the hunters found their trail. Dust rose on the horizon as armored riders approached. Daniel woke at once, his instincts sharp. He turned to Liara. "They've found us. We'll have to fight our way out." Fear clutched her heart. "You can't fight them all." He gave her a small, wry smile. "Maybe not, but I can fight long enough to keep you alive." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to beg him not to risk himself, but the determination in his eyes silenced her. He was ready to defy an entire tradition for her. And in that moment, as the sound of hooves thundered closer, Liara felt something new stir within her chest. Not just fear, not just hope, but the first spark of trust. Trust in a human who believed her life mattered. The hunters came, shouting war cries, their spears gleaming under the rising sun. Daniel drew his blade, standing tall before them, his figure a shield between death and the woman behind him. The desert wind roared, carrying with it the clash of destiny. Liara pressed a hand to her chest, whispering words she never thought she would speak. "Spirits, if you are listening, let me live. Let me live with him." And for the first time, she no longer wanted to die. The riders thundered across the desert, their spears shining in the sunlight. Dust rose in great clouds behind them, a storm of sand chasing down two lone fugitives. Daniel stood at the entrance of the cave, blade in hand, his body tense like a bow drawn to its limit. Liara stayed behind him, her heart racing as fast as the pounding hooves. She had seen executions before. She had watched warriors fall to blades and fire. But never had she felt this strange twist inside her chest, the terror of losing someone she had only just begun to understand. The hunters dismounted, their boots sinking into the sand. They formed a half-circle around the cave. The leader stepped forward, his voice deep and commanding. "Human," he called, "you do not belong here. Give us the cursed one and you may leave alive." Daniel's grip tightened on his blade. "No." The hunters laughed, cruel and mocking. Their leader raised his spear. "Then you die with her." The clash was sudden. Spears thrust forward. Blades rang against metal, and Daniel moved with the sharp instincts of a soldier. He parried the first strike, ducked low, and drove his shoulder into one attacker, sending the man stumbling back. The desert air filled with the sound of steel and shouts. Liara pressed herself against the stone, fear clawing at her. She wanted to look away, but her eyes refused. She watched as Daniel fought, his movements filled with determination more than strength. He was outnumbered, yet he never faltered. Every time an enemy tried to reach her, he blocked them, his body always between her and danger. But numbers were cruel. The hunters pressed harder, their spears closing in from all sides. Daniel gritted his teeth, sweat running down his face, his breath heavy. He knew he could not fight forever. "Liara," he shouted without looking back. "Run when you see a chance." Her eyes widened. "No, if I leave, they will kill you." He shoved back an attacker and met her gaze for a brief second. "Better me than both of us." Her heart twisted painfully. She had been ready for her own death, but not his. Never his. And then fate turned. From the cliffs above, a rock slide tumbled. Whether it was chance or the spirits she had prayed to, she did not know. Boulders crashed down, scattering the hunters. Dust filled the air, shouts rang out, and chaos broke their formation. Daniel grabbed Liara's hand. "Now!" Together they ran, slipping through the confusion. The desert stretched before them once more, wide and merciless, but freedom lay in its endless horizon. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs trembled, until the shouts faded behind them. When at last they stopped, both collapsed against a cluster of rocks, gasping for breath. Daniel dropped his blade beside him, his hands trembling with exhaustion. Liara knelt beside him, her chest heaving, her eyes fixed on him. "You fought them all," she whispered. He shook his head with a faint, tired smile. "No. Luck fought with us, but luck doesn't last forever." Liara looked down, her heart still pounding. For the first time, she realized something. She did not want to return to her people, not even if they begged. The thought of being thrown back into the pit filled her with more fear than the hunters' blades. That night they found shelter under an arch of stone. Daniel lit a small fire, its glow flickering across the cave walls. Liara sat close, her arms wrapped around herself. The silence stretched long before she finally spoke. "My people believe I am cursed," she said quietly. "From the day I was born, they saw only misfortune. When crops failed, they blamed me. When battles were lost, they blamed me. I began to believe it myself." Daniel poked at the fire, listening. His face was calm, his eyes steady. "I was told my life could only have meaning if I was buried alive." Liara continued, her voice shaking. "That the earth would swallow my curse, I accepted it. I even asked for it, but now—" She trailed off, her eyes glistening. "Now I don't know what to believe." Daniel leaned back against the stone, the firelight casting shadows across his features. Belief can be a cage, he said softly. Sometimes people build walls around others because they're afraid. They call it tradition. They call it fate. But it's just fear. Liara studied him, her eyes wide. You speak as though you know. I do. His voice was heavy. On my world, I fought in wars. We were praised as heroes when the fighting was fierce. But when the war ended, we were cast aside. People looked at us as broken, dangerous. I carried their judgment like chains. It took me years to understand that I wasn't the curse. They were afraid of what I reminded them of. Liara felt a shiver run through her. His words echoed her own life in ways she had never thought possible. Then, what am I? She asked, her voice small, fragile. Daniel looked at her across the fire, his gaze unwavering. You're someone who deserves to live. That's all that matters. Her throat tightened. No one had ever told her she deserved life. Not once. Her people had only told her she deserved death. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but for the first time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of release. Silence settled between them, but it was a gentle silence, not heavy. They sat, together, the fire warming their faces, the stars watching from above. For the first time in her memory, Liara felt safe, not from danger, for danger still hunted them, but safe in her heart. Days passed as they moved further from the city. Daniel hunted small creatures for food, shared his water, and never let her lag behind. Liara grew stronger, her steps steadier, her eyes brighter. She began to smile, though faintly, when Daniel spoke with his dry humor. One evening they camped near an oasis. Liara sat by the water's edge, watching the ripples dance under the fading light. Daniel approached, setting down a bundle of gathered fruit. You're quiet, he said. She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. I'm thinking. About what? She hesitated, then spoke. All my life I believed I was nothing but a curse. But when you pulled me from the pit, you didn't see a curse, you saw me. I don't understand why. Daniel crouched beside her, his reflection rippling in the water. Because I've learned something, Liara. A person is not what others say about them. A person is what they choose to be. Her heart fluttered at his words. She stared at the water, her reflection mingling with his. For the first time she imagined herself not as a condemned woman, but as someone who could choose. Someone who could live. The thought scared her, but it also filled her with a strange warmth. That night, as she lay beside the fire, Liara whispered to herself, perhaps I'm not cursed. Perhaps I am something more. Daniel, half asleep, heard her words but said nothing. A faint smile touched his lips, and in the quiet, Liara realized something even more frightening than death. She was beginning to care for him. The human who had risked everything, the human who believed in her when no one else did. It was a bond, born not of fear but of trust, and that bond, she sensed, would change everything. The desert winds carried dust across the endless horizon as Daniel and Liara moved further from the city. Days blurred together, walking beneath the burning sun, resting in shadows of stone, and drinking from rare streams. The hunters' shouts had grown distant, but both knew the pursuit was not over. Her people would not easily forgive what had been taken from them. Still, with every step, Liara felt something inside her changing. She had once believed her life belonged to the earth, that her body was meant to be swallowed whole by stone and sand. Yet now, with Daniel at her side, she began to see the world in a different way. The air smelled richer, the water tasted sweeter, and the sky stretched wider. Life, which had once felt like a punishment, was becoming something she wanted. One evening, they camped on a ridge overlooking a canyon. The sky glowed red with sunset and shadows stretched long across the land. Daniel gathered wood for a fire while Liara sat quietly, staring at the colors of the sky. Her voice broke the silence. If we keep running, will they ever stop? Daniel, placed the wood down and sat across from her. His eyes studied the fading light. Maybe, maybe not. People who cling to fear don't let go easily, but we can make it harder for them to find us. We can choose where to go, how to live. Liara's eyes lowered. Choice. It feels like a word that was never meant for me. Daniel leaned forward. Then start now. What do you want, Liara? Not what they wanted. Not what they demanded. What do you want? The question struck her like an arrow. She opened her mouth, but no answer came. For so long, her life had been shaped by others, by the priests, by tradition, by the whispers of curses. She had never once asked herself what she wanted. Her hands trembled as she whispered, I don't know. Daniel gave a small smile, not mocking but gentle. Then we'll find the answer together. That night, as stars filled the sky, Liara lay awake thinking about his words. Choice, desire, a future. These ideas had once felt like distant dreams, but now they pressed close, demanding to be faced. The next morning, trouble returned. From the far side of the canyon, a column of riders appeared, their banners whipping in the wind. Priests rode at the front, their robes dark and heavy, their voices chanting. Behind them marched soldiers with spears glinting in the sunlight. Liara's breath caught. Her people had come in force. Daniel's eyes narrowed. They've brought half the city with them. The priests' voices rose, echoing across the canyon. Liara, daughter of failure, return to us. The spirits demand your sacrifice. The earth waits for you. Do not shame your blood further. The words cut into her chest. For a moment, old fear returned, wrapping chains around her heart. She looked at the pit below, the cliffs on either side, the soldiers forming ranks. There was nowhere to run this time. Daniel drew his blade, stepping forward. Stay behind. Me. But Liara's voice trembled. If I go to them, they may let you live. Daniel turned sharply, his eyes blazing. Don't you dare. Don't you throw away what we've fought for. Tears burned in her eyes. I was born for this. Fate. Maybe it is better if... No. His voice was hard, cutting through her fear. You were not born to die. You were born to live. You asked me why I saved you. This is the reason. To show you that you can choose. Right now, Liara. Do you choose to die because they told you to? Or do you choose to live because you want to? Her body trembled. The canyon seemed to spin around her. For years, she had believed her life belonged to the ground. Yet when she looked at Daniel, standing tall with his blade ready, she saw something she had never seen before, someone who believed in her worth. The priests shouted again, their words sharp and commanding. Come, Liara, end the curse. But for the first time, she shook her head. No. Her voice was weak at first, then stronger. No, I will not be buried. I will not give you my life. It is mine. The soldiers stirred in shock. Even the priests faltered. Daniel's mouth curved into a fierce smile. That's the choice I was waiting for. The priests raised their arms, calling for the soldiers to advance. The ground shook with footsteps as spears lowered and shields clattered. Daniel stood ready, his blade gleaming in the sun. The battle was chaos. Arrows hissed through the air. Stones clattered against the cliffs. Daniel fought with skill born from years of war, but the enemy pressed in from all sides. Liara stood. Behind him, fear tightening her chest, but she did not waver this time. She would not return to the pit. In the middle of the fight, a strange calm settled over her. She closed her eyes and pressed her hands to her chest. For the first time, she did not pray for death. She prayed for life, for his, for hers, and for something beyond both. When the chance came, Daniel seized her hand, pulling her toward a narrow path down the canyon. They scrambled over rocks, arrows clattering behind them. Dust filled their lungs as they ran, stumbling but unbroken. Hours later, when the sounds of pursuit had faded, they collapsed beneath a ledge, their bodies shaking with exhaustion. Daniel's arms bled from shallow cuts, and Liara's feet were torn from the rough stone, but they were alive. She turned to him, her breath ragged. "I chose Daniel. I chose life." He met her gaze, his chest heaving, and for the first time since he had arrived on her world, he laughed softly. "Good. That's all I ever wanted for you." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not of sorrow. They were of relief, of release. In the days that followed, they moved further into uncharted lands, places even her people feared to tread. They found valleys with rivers and green fields, lands untouched by war or tradition. Here, Liara felt her body and spirit begin to heal, but soon she noticed something strange. Her body felt different. Her steps grew slower, her hunger sharper, and her heart beat with a rhythm that frightened her. At first, she thought it was exhaustion from the endless running, but as days passed, she began to understand. Life stirred within her. The realization struck like a lightning bolt. She sat by the river one evening, her hands pressed against her stomach, her breath shaking. A child. Not of her people, not bound by her curse. A child of her and the human who had defied death for her. Daniel approached, carrying firewood. He noticed her distant gaze and crouched beside her. "What's wrong?" Liara looked at him, tears shining in her eyes. "Daniel, I think I carry life." His eyes widened. He froze, the wood slipping from his arms. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of the river. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face. Tired, stunned, but filled with warmth. "Then you've truly chosen life, Liara, more than you know." Her throat tightened, her tears spilling freely. She leaned into him, trembling, and for the first time she felt not just saved, but reborn. The valley stretched wide, filled with tall grass that swayed like waves under the wind. Beyond the ridges, the desert lay behind them, a world of pain and shadows they had escaped. Here, in this untouched land, streams cut silver lines through. The soil and trees grew tall against the sky. For Liara, it felt like stepping into another life, a life she had once thought impossible. She often sat by the river, her hand resting on her stomach. The new life within her filled her with both fear and wonder. She had been told she was cursed, told her blood carried nothing but sorrow. Yet here she was, carrying something pure, something born not of tradition or demand, but of choice. Daniel worked nearby, gathering wood, building shelter, and hunting small creatures for food. He had grown quieter since Liara told him of the child. Not distant, but thoughtful, as if carrying the weight of something greater. At night, she often caught him staring at the stars, his expression unreadable. One evening, as the fire crackled, softly, Liara finally asked him, "Do you regret it?" Daniel turned to her, his brows furrowed. "Regret what?" "Saving me," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "Giving me this chance. Now I carry life, and it will not be easy. We are far from my people, far from your world. Everything is uncertain." He studied her, then shook his head slowly. "No, Liara. I don't regret it. I would regret leaving you in that pit. I would regret letting you believe you were nothing. But this is life. And life is worth every risk." Her chest tightened and tears glistened in her eyes. She lowered her head, pressing a hand over her stomach. For so long, she had begged for death. Now she prayed for this small life to survive. Days turned into weeks. They built a small shelter of stone and wood by the river. Daniel taught Liara how to use snares to catch food, how to build fires, and how to watch the sky for storms. Return, Liara taught him the plants of her world, the roots safe to eat, the herbs that eased wounds, the flowers that glowed faintly at night. Together they survived, their lives weaving into something simple but strong. At night, when the stars filled the sky, Liara would lie beside Daniel, her voice soft. "Do you think the spirits will punish us?" Daniel would smile faintly. "If they wanted to." They had their chance, we're still here. Maybe the spirits aren't angry. Maybe they're watching to see what we build. The thought comforted her, but shadows of the past were not gone. One morning, smoke rose on the horizon. Liara's heart froze as she saw dark figures moving across the ridge. Her people had not forgotten. The priests had sent another search party, unwilling to let her defiance go unanswered. "They will not stop," she whispered, fear tightening her throat. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we make them see. Not with blades this time, with truth." Liara looked at him in shock. "They will not listen." "Maybe not all," Daniel admitted. "But some will. And if they see you alive, if they see what you carry, it will be harder for them to call you cursed." Her hand pressed against her stomach, trembling. "You would face them again? After all this?" He nodded firmly. "I didn't save you to live in hiding forever. You deserve to live without fear." That night, Liara could not sleep. She thought of the pit waiting for her, of the chance demanding her death. Yet when she looked at Daniel, standing tall and unshaken, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt courage. When the riders arrived at the valley's edge, Daniel and Liara stood together. The priest shouted accusations, calling her cursed, demanding she return. Soldiers raised their spears, their faces stern, but Liara stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with every word. "You called me cursed. You called me nothing, but I am alive, and I carry life within me." Gasps rippled through the soldiers. Even the priests faltered, their chants breaking. Liara raised her chin, her voice ringing clear. "If the spirits wished me buried, they would have taken me already. But they gave me this. A child, a future. This is no curse. This is proof that I was never meant to die." Daniel stood beside her, his hand steady on the hilt of his blade, though he did not raise it. His presence was enough, a shield of quiet strength. The soldiers exchanged glances. Some lowered their spears. The priests shouted louder, their voices desperate, but their authority wavered. Liara placed her hand over her stomach, her eyes unyielding. "I choose life. You cannot take that from me." The silence that followed was heavier than any battle. Finally, the soldiers turned their mounts, leaving the priests shouting into the empty air. For the first time, tradition had cracked. Not all believed her, but enough doubted, enough questioned. As the dust settled, Liara turned to Daniel. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of relief. "We did not fight them with death. We fought them with life." Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes soft. "And life won." In the weeks that followed, the valley became their home. Liara's body grew round with the child, and Daniel worked tirelessly to prepare for the day of birth. He carved tools, built stronger shelters, and gathered herbs she told him would help. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Liara rested against him, her head on his shoulder. "Do you think our child will be accepted?" she asked softly. Daniel wrapped an arm around her. "Maybe not by everyone, but the world is wide, Liara. We'll find a place where acceptance doesn't matter, because we'll already belong." Her eyes closed, peace washing over her. And when the day finally came, when the valley filled with the cry of new life, Liara knew her fate had been rewritten. She had not been buried in silence. She had been given a future, a child born of courage, of defiance, and of hope. She looked at Daniel, holding their child in his arms, his eyes filled with awe. "You gave me life," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not just mine. Theirs too." Daniel smiled, his voice quiet but sure. "No, Liara. You chose life. I only stood beside you." As the stars shone overhead, Liara realized the truth. She had once asked to be buried alive, but instead, she had been given something far greater, a chance to live, a chance to love, and a child who would carry their story into the future. It was not the end of her life. It was only the beginning.